Hi, I'm Steve Sloka. I'm one of the Contour maintainers, and today I want to talk about a new feature in Contour 1.9, which is external auth support. With external authorization, you're now able to centrally authorize all of your requests from one place, and this avoids you having to implement this authorization on each backend service within your cluster. Let's go ahead and dig in and see what this looks like. So in this diagram, this shows you all the components now that are required to be touched to implement this new feature. So the first thing you can do is deploy an external auth service to your cluster. The service is responsible to talking to Envoy, and it'll go out and reach out to some sort of auth provider to understand if the request coming in should be authorized or not. Next, what you'll do is you'll implement an extension service CRD. This is a new CRD that Contour is offering, which opens up some extension points to configure these things like authorization. Once you've created the CRD, Contour will then watch that CRD and see that it got created, and then make it available for these HTTP proxies to be used. Once you've created an HTTP proxy, you can enable that extension service from your virtual host, and you'll be able to reference that from here. And that will tell Contour that we want to add this authorization filter to Envoy for that specific virtual host. So then when a request comes through, Envoy will pass it off to the auth service and so on. Let's go ahead and dig in and run this for real in a real cluster. So what I have here is I've got my cluster running. So this is a kind cluster. It's running 1.19. So I created that, and then I went and deployed Contour. That's all I have in here. So if I go ahead and get my Contour pods, you'll see I've got my 2 Contour pods running as well as my Envoy pod. Next what we'll do is we'll go ahead and deploy our auth bits. So in here I have some prereqs. So what I have is a namespace, I have a service account, and I have a role and a role binding. And that role binding is going to allow the service account to watch for secrets. And this is just going to be to make our auth server a little more secure so it can only watch secrets. So we'll go ahead and apply that one. All right, so I got that created. Now we'll go ahead and deploy our actual auth server. So this is just going to be a deployment. We're going to call it HT password. That's the backend we're going to implement today. Here we're going to reference that same service account we created in the previous step. We're going to use the Contour AuthServer v2 image. So out in the project Contour org, there's a bunch of projects, and one of the projects now is this AuthServer project. And this AuthServer gives you the backend that Envoy needs to implement this feature. So there's a test server we can use just for real simple tests, and the one we're going to implement today is this HT password, right? And this is going to give us a basic auth from our clients. All right, so we're going to go ahead and implement that deployment. This auth server is going to use the HT password backend. We're going to expose 9443 as the port, and then we're going to bring in some certificates. Now today for cert generation, I'm going to use this cert gen job that we use in Contour. This is the same cert gen job that comes with the quick start. It's a silly way to create self-signed certs. If you like, you can also use Cert Manager. So out here on the Project Contour website, there's a guide. And this guide outlines how to use Cert Manager with Authorization Server. So you deploy Cert Manager, create some issuers, and then patch these different resources with Customize, and you'll end up in the same place. For today's demo, just to make it simple, you can follow along with this really easily. So again, we're going to deploy our deployment and our service for the auth server, and then we'll run this cert gen job. That'll create us some secrets in our namespace. This is going to be O2 auth. All right, there's our backend, and we'll do O2 cert gen's job, and there's our job. So now if we go ahead and get secrets, what we'll see is we have, 3 seconds ago, this Contour cert got created and this Envoy cert got created. Now again, they're called that because we use those in Contour and Envoy for a normal deployment. We're going to reuse this today just to make things simple. All right, so we have that. Next we need to do is we need to create a secret for our backend. So this backend is going to be the basic auth password file. So if you refer back to the guide here uses these commands to go create user 1, 2, and 3 with password 1, 2, and 3. So I went ahead and did this for you up front, and we have this here in this secret. So you can just apply this. This is going to be O3 secret. All right, so now we have that secret created as well. Next, we'll create our extension service. And again, this is what Contour is going to consume to be able to understand what auth services exist out in the cluster. So this is a Project Contour version. This is version v1 alpha 1. And again, we're gonna, in the spec here, this needs to match the service we deployed in Kubernetes. So this service name is HD password, and the port was 9443, and the protocol is H2 because we want to enable a gRPC connection between Envoy and this backend auth service. So we'll go ahead and deploy this one. All right, there's our extension service created. Next, we're going to deploy this sample app. And this is the silly echo app that's using ingress conformance. And it echoes back the request you sent it. So we'll deploy this. This will be our sample backend that we'll use to send requests to. All right, so let's go ahead and watch and make sure this goes healthy in the right namespace. There we go. So you can see our AuthServer is healthy. Yep, there goes our backend is healthy as well. All right, so we have that running. Now let's go and create a resource, an ingress resource to point to it. So here we'll create an HTTP proxy resource. The fully qualified domain name will be local.projectcontour.io. And that's a simple DNS server we've set up for you that resolves back to localhost. So again, when I'm using Kind in my cluster, I have Kind exposed over my localhost port 80 and 443. So now I can use DNS names to make requests go through as if they were real. So now you don't have to deal with setting up DNS yourself. Here we'll reference the secret. We're going to terminate TLS at Envoy for this application using this Envoy cert. And again, this came from the cert gen job where we're using just to make this demo really simple. We'll send traffic then to this domain name to the ingress conformance echo app we just deployed in the previous step, which is the 04 sample app. And we'll do 05 proxy. Cool. So now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and get our proxies, and we'll see that we have that. This is the valid proxy. We can go ahead and copy this domain name, and we'll do a curl-i and -k because we're on a self-signed cert. And you can see this app works, right? We got a 200 response, and down here, this is the JSON response that gets echoed back to us. Now, we haven't actually done anything with the auth yet, right? This is just any kind of normal ingress application now. So we'll go ahead and enable that. So this is the same exact HTTP proxy resource, but now there's this new bit here of this authorization. So this authorization struct here now lets you implement this authorization filter in Envoy. So when Contour sees this, it's going to look for this extension ref. The extension ref is going to point to the extension service that we created back here in this 04 extension service. And then again, that service points to the Kubernetes service called HD password. Now, once we deploy this, again, Contour will configure this vhost in Envoy to have this authorization filter enabled, and the next request will be authorized. So we'll go ahead and deploy this one. All right, so now if we do the same curl, what we get is a 401 auth denied, right? And that's because now we have authorization enabled, but we haven't passed it a user. So if we want, we can go ahead and pass it a user. So we'll curl this again, curl-k-i, and this time we'll pass in a user. And instead of user 2, let's do user 1 with password 1. And now you'll see we get a valid response, a 200 response. And that's because we're passing it a valid username and password. And again, that came from that secret we created here in step 3. That user 1 and user 2 is embedded in this secret. If we go ahead and pass user 2 with password 2, again, we get a 200 response, and here's our payload. Now, if we pass in the wrong password, so if we take this password off and say make the password Contour, you'll see because we don't match properly, we get a 401 response. So I know this was quick. I know this is kind of a silly demo, but there's a lot of resources out here on the Project Contour website. So please check out this guide here, which talks about how this author support is enabled. Some diagrams here on how this request flow comes through. Check out the blog post that we have on the 1.9 release. Again, it has some more information and diagrams that help explain how this should work. Please reach out to us. We have Contour community meetings every other week, one on the US time, one on the Australia time. And we also have office hours every other Thursday. Anywhere you can find us on Project Contour, on Twitter, on the Contour Slack. So thanks for joining. I hope this was helpful, and we'll see you online.